Take it easy. Take it easy.
Hey everyone, welcome into the pod. My name is Nate, and I'm accompanied by my buddy, Tony. Tony, why don't you tell the people what your name is?
Hello, I think my name is Tony, and I am happy to be here.
So our question today, we're just going to jump right into it. The question is, why is change so hard? This is a topic that you and I, in talking about starting this, is one of the first things that we were excited to get into. The topic of, as we coined it, the discipline of hard things.
Absolutely.
So, but before anything else, I am actually really curious to get your opinion here. The word discipline is kind of a buzzword, usually in Christian circles. You and I are followers of Jesus, but it's a word that you can apply in a lot of different arenas. When I say discipline, what do you understand by the word?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, when I do get to the root of the word, my mind does go back to some of my Christian influences. It does go back to thinking about what it means to really dig deep into something. For me personally, I think about discipleship, and I think about not just having some kind of label on your forehead, but actually having behavior and habits that dig to the core of who you are. And so discipline, then when we came up with this idea of, what are some of the discipline of some of those hard things? Those are things that don't just appear overnight. They're not things that you're just born with to some degree, but instead it's like you have to nurture it. You have to let it grow in you, and that takes time, and it is not easy. Does that make sense from my perspective?
Yeah. You familiar with Dallas Willard?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I used to read a lot of Dallas Willard,
Mhm.
and he talks about discipline a whole lot. He has a book called The Spirit of the Disciplines that I learned a lot from.
Yeah.
But he talked about discipline as any action or like series of actions that you go through right now that works to make you able to do something in the future that you're currently unable to do.
Mm.
So there's something that you want to be able to do, but you can't currently do it. So a discipline is something you undertake in the present that helps you to be able to do something in the future that you aren't currently able to do.
Yeah, I completely agree with that definition for sure. And I think, what we talked about is a really good analogy for life is the gym and our personal fitness journey, and how that looks different, not only in everyone else's lives, but in ours specifically, and asking ourselves, like, what what is it about the gym, and trying to get into this workout journey on a consistent basis that provides discipline that helps us grow that really hard thing in our life.
Yeah. Is it the main thing that you think of when you think of the discipline of hard things in your life?
It's definitely not the main thing. I would say that in this past couple of seasons for me, it's one of the more novel things. It's something that, yeah, I've been fit to some degree in my whole life, and I would say that fit, what that really means is I haven't been overweight. I've been able to do sports and physical activities, but I've never had the level of discipline, the level of consistency, specifically in the gym for an extended period of time like I've wanted. And just in this last year, I've really experienced success in building that discipline to a level that I have not experienced before. And so that's definitely, I would say, and to be transparent, I first started probably about a year ago now with a personal trainer at the gym that I go to, and
Oh,
with him, I've been fairly consistent about 2 to 3 times a week for this entire year, and it's just like everything I've ever done before. It's just been, yeah, I'll go to the gym, and I go like maybe once a week or once a month more realistically, or man, I haven't been in the last couple months. I need to make sure I go and do that and check it off my list. But actually having the kind of growth that comes from like actually building strength and lifting heavier weights and keeping track on some of those things 2 to 3 times every single week, and like seeing that growth, that's really been an eye-opening new thing for me.
hmm. Yeah. Has it been fairly regular, or like a consistent thing in the past where you've tried to incorporate that sort of thing, but it hasn't stuck long term?
Yeah, I'd say absolutely as well. For me, like I said, it's always something that when I was younger, I never really had to think about. As I'm getting older, and it really is something that's like, okay, if I don't try harder right now, right? Like that's always been my mentality is, oh man, I have to try harder. Why am I not trying hard enough if this is something that I want in my life? But the truth is, the times where I was the most successful, I think about maybe 10 years ago to the early days of when I first met you, Nate. And you and I actually worked out together for an extended period of time, like almost a whole year together. And that's, thinking about that and how much better I felt about myself, both physically and mentally, because of those hard things. Like, man, the most success I ever had was when I was with someone else. And so
Mm,
I think that was a big thing for me, was really kind of just swallowing my pride a little bit and saying,
yeah.
it's not the end of the world to admit that maybe for me, my own journey, I need that extra outside help, that consistency or accountability from someone else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, my history as being involved in like the exercise and weightlifting scene. And then I had that season where I was working as a personal trainer as well. And I had my own personal training business. A lot of the clients, well, you kind of got two sorts of clients. You got some that would come in having no idea what to do in the gym at all.
Yeah.
They just knew they needed to be exercising, but they didn't know what to do, and they were willing to pay you for your expertise.
Hmm.
But there was a whole other category of people who knew they needed to be doing it, but hadn't been successful in making themselves do it,
Mm.
like of their own volition, of their own discipline. And so having that, like, okay, I'm going to put the money down to meet somebody, and
Yeah.
they're going to be there waiting for me. So I've paid for it and I've committed. Like I'm knee deep in this now. That can be the extra kick in the pants a lot of people need. Like from a bigger perspective, you talked about that season way back
Hmm.
when you and me and a couple other guys would be sitting in the gym in the afternoons after classes and stuff like that. And for me, my personality has never been the type to really want to be in a group. I thrive on just kind of flying solo.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've worked out with so many people over the years who are like, hey, can I please just show up at the same time that you're showing up? Because I need to just be around somebody. Like it can be pulling teeth for some people to want to try to do something alone. I think of you read a lot of like entrepreneurial books, and you read the Bible, and you read all these things from these different arenas of life, it seems, that all agree that if you want to make any kind of significant change, you need to surround yourself with people who are also trying to do the same things that you're doing.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So, I mean, that's honestly a whole other topic.
Yeah.
If the question is, why is it so hard to change? I mean, there's a real case to be made for us sitting down and recording an episode about community
Mm.
and about like accountability and having people who are also moving in the same direction as you're moving. If you want to talk about why the church exists or why it should exist,
Yep.
that whole picture of like shared life and shared family and moving together in one direction. I mean, that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's absolutely true. And there's a few things that you said that I wanted to touch on as well.
yeah.
Like you brought up, like for you personally, just your personality, maybe in a vacuum, you have that tendency to want to be by yourself, and you accomplish this hard thing by yourself and challenge yourself. And it does make me think, like the our fitness journey is different, right? What I go through, what you go through, what whoever might be listening to this, what they're going through when it comes to their fitness journey, it is going to be different based on personalities, right? And I'll be the first to admit as well that I am an extrovert in the sense that I like being around people just in general. I do recharge that way. I know that can be a foreign concept for a lot of people, but
That's
like
foreign to me.
exactly, like the host mentality, right? And that's why even doing this podcast, like I like being that host. I like being that person who makes sure that everyone it feels included, that no one is left out, right? But there's the other part of what you said. you said that, there are two categories a lot of the times that you saw as a fitness guru yourself, really. And I'll admit, I fall into
Oh,
that first category
don't say
of,
guru. I'm not a guru.
I
I
beg to differ
reject that.
compared to me, but but that
Sorry,
first
go ahead.
category I do fall into a lot, where having that extra kick in the pants does help me. But there is something about uh, what you said, that having someone around who truly does know what they're talking about, or at least has studied or done a little bit more effort, or just dug a little bit deeper whenever we're talking about the gym or any other facet, right? Right. Having someone who has taken those steps in a direction that, man, I want to go in that direction, but I am nervous myself, or I'm not sure myself. So having someone who understands, hey, this is a healthy lift, this is good form, this is good posture, like having groups like that, despite personalities, like it really brings out the best in both kind of personalities, and it are all sides, right? And I
Yep.
think that's exactly what you're saying when it comes to the church and the idea of the early church, even all the way to the modern. It's we're all going to have different things that we're good at, that we excel at. Whenever our natural inclination is to be the host mentality, our natural inclination is to have that self mastery that you pursue. It's like being around each other can only make each other better. And I found that very, very appealing with what you just said.
Yeah, for sure. I want to take a step back actually
Hmm.
and think like big picture with the idea of the discipline of hard things. It's kind of the topic, along with the question, why is it so hard to change?
Yeah, yeah.
What is the connection that you see and that you've seen in your life? Because you've talked about this season being the most consistent you've been with this, and you alluded to it having a bit of a ripple effect in your life.
Hmm.
What is if you could just verbalize it clearly, what is the connection you see between building consistency in that kind of exercise, weightlifting, physical aspect, physical arena, and then everything else in life for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question.
Because I've got thoughts, and I'm curious what
Hmm.
you have to say.
Yeah, for me, there's a part of me that inside of my mind, I'm still 23 years old, or 27 is like the perfect age, right? I'm not close to 30 yet, but I'm way way out of college, and
Whoa, you're in your 30s? Holy cow, bro. You're so old. Wow, that's
yeah,
crazy.
right,
Can't
right.
relate.
So it's like, as much as I wish that wasn't the reality, I am approaching my 40s, and my body is telling me things that I've not felt before, right? and and it's
Yeah.
and it's not
It's
just
that feeling. You're becoming a man.
exactly right, but and that's just physically, but as we get older, and I know that a lot of our conversations, some of the ideas that we've thought about already, have to do with the concept of growing in not just our age, but growing in our understanding, growing in our seeking of wisdom. Like there are a lot of new challenges that it's like, man, if I want to accomplish this thing, and we are talking about the gym and the consistency in the gym right now, one of the first challenges that come to my mind is, why didn't I start this 5 years ago? If only I did this 2 years ago, if only I did this 10 years ago. Can you imagine how fit I would be right now? Can you imagine where I'd be right now? And it's like I had that playing in my mind over and over and over again. And as much as there might be some truth to that, what it really did more than anything else was distract me. And so in this
Hmm.
last year or so, I really had to say, hey, how do I actually operate? Like the good with the bad, the realistically ugly things. Like what motivates me so that I can start to accomplish this thing, and so that I can then say the opposite, that 2 years from now, man, I'm going to be that much better. 5 years from now, I'm going to be that much better. Instead of looking back with all this regret and realizing that life is getting away from me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, totally, totally. So is there like a specific area, and I guess to get personal, is there a specific area that you have seen that ripple effect in your life? So getting the physical aspect like down in quotation marks, or making those improvements, building that discipline in that area. Has there been a particular area that you could put your finger on and say that is an area that's been directly affected by me getting this other area in order?
Yeah, I think the very first one is going to be confidence for sure. Like there's
Mm.
always a level of self-esteem that comes with your identity and being very secure in who you know, who you are, right? And not just who you know. But the thing is, no matter how confident you are with your identity, like we are physical bodies as well. And that's insecurities as guys, especially that we hear a lot when it comes to the lack of being in a weight room for being younger. Or for me, I was, very skinny, smaller guy, and it's just like something that I never let distract me from who I am. But there's always going to be that inner voice. There's always going to be that other side of me that says, well, there is some truth to that, right? You could be better, you could be stronger, you could be more fit. And just understanding that, look, not only am I not going to let those things motivate me, but I will build my confidence across the board, not just in my identity, who I am in life, but also this fitness journey that does build discipline by doing something consistently on a day-to-day basis that I wouldn't be doing otherwise. Like that is a hard thing the fact that it's present in my life, I do believe that it has had a positive impact on my self-esteem in ways that I never
Yeah.
would have known if it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. And then that bleeds over into like every area.
Yeah.
It's having that confidence. And yeah, I'll tell you, you can tell me if you relate with this, but this is something I've noticed. I've been active, whether in sports directly or formally or informally, weightlifting, or cardiovascular stuff. I've been active for a long time, really consistently, just been involved in that world.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some seasons where I've had that habit more or less consistently for 12 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
But there's with more or less, there's the less part where you'll have, or for me, I'll have a season. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's a few weeks or whatever, where I'm injured or I'm not feeling well or I'm really busy or whatever else, where things like start kind of slipping away. And tell me if you relate with this. When I have times where it feels like I let the physical discipline slip, the weightlifting or the running or just whatever part of that activity part, when I kind of sacrifice that part, it feels like there's a ripple effect in my willingness to do things I don't want to do.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's almost like I feel like they're interconnected, where if I'm like, yeah, I'll do these hard things, but I'm not going to do that one. I just don't want to do that one. And not just for like a day or an hour or something, but for like weeks at a time.
Yeah.
It feels like my overall willingness to do all of it just kind of diminishes. Can you relate with that at all?
Yeah, no, I absolutely can. I think that is true. I think, there's something about, if we're talking about being in the gym specifically to lift weights and to try to grow in what that number and what those reps look like, I think that, sometimes that can be something that we don't give a whole lot of thought process to outside of the gym. But it really is a consistent thing that is happening on a daily basis. And with us saying no to that or forgetting it or not choosing it, then it can be way easier to do the same thing outside of the gym and say, this is something that I just don't want to do today. So yeah, I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, there's in getting my personal training certification years ago, there's this law of muscular contraction that we learned about called the all or none law.
Mm.
And very simply, it said once a stimulus reaches an appropriate level, either all of the muscle is contracting it or none of it is. So if the stimulus is underneath a certain level, then none of the muscle is contracting.
Mm.
But if it's at a certain level, the entire muscle contracts. And so even though your muscles have multiple heads, your biceps has 2, so your triceps have 3 heads, your quadriceps have 4, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And even though you can do exercises that directly stimulate certain heads more than others. Either the whole muscle is contracting or none of it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like I've traced out, or at least just noticed a trend in my life where either I'm being consistent and disciplined in almost every area of my life, or I'm not being disciplined at all.
Yeah, it's
Like it
all
feels
or
like if I
nothing.
let yeah, it feels like I'm very all or nothing in that way. And maybe
Yeah.
maybe it's just me. Like maybe I'm just broken. But it seems in the people that I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of schools and like discipleship training programs and stuff like that. But it feels like when people begin to push themselves in a certain area, whether it's their like diet or their strength or their learning or their musical discipline or their art discipline or their relationship with God or like whatever area,
Mm-hmm.
when they begin to push themselves hard and apply themselves hard in a particular area, it feels like the other areas of their life that they've also been lax in previously start getting stimulated as well.
Yeah.
And so it can feel like a cascade effect. Just a really good friend of mine was going through a super, super hard time recently. And I was just asking him, me and some buddies were like, okay, how is this area of your life? Like, are you exercising? And I was like, no, I haven't exercised in like a year. Like,
Mhm.
okay, how's your relationship with God? And be like, I haven't spent time alone with God in like 3 months. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
like how's this and how's this? And we were just asking all these areas, and every single one of them had like shrunk down to like maintenance level. And so we're like, all right, man, like start on all these different things. Just doesn't have to be a ton of stuff. Just start one day a week, hitting up the gym again, start spending daily time with God again, start just like all these different areas. He just started chipping away at again. And within like 3 months, he's like, I'm doing so well. Everything's going great. I'm so happy and fulfilled. And it just feels like we are kind of all or none in that regard. And I have to be really intentional for me in not letting myself drop any area for too long,
Yeah.
or it feels like everything starts getting dragged to this. I don't know, maybe it's like an inertia and momentum thing. And maybe that's part of the discussion of why change is so hard. Inertia, which is, it's the tendency of an object that is still to remain still.
Mm-hmm.
So if an object is not moving, it is much more difficult to make a still object move than it is to keep a moving object moving. So inertia versus momentum.
Yeah.
It feels like we are that way in our soul. And if if we're static, if we're not moving, it feels like it's just that much more difficult to start something than it is to keep something up.
Yeah, I completely
But
agree
I do
with
think
you.
the benefit of that is we like it spreads throughout all these different areas. So that all or none thing that's something I feel like I've picked up on consistently in my life and in the lives of others.
Yeah, and just thinking about just like you said, the very nature of change, and whenever it's in the gym or not, it's like, we want things to be easy, right? That makes sense. Like we want to be able to lift a weight and it be an easy weight. We also want that weight to be twice as heavy as what the person next to us is lifting, right?
The
But it's
ego
like,
lifts.
yeah, right. But I think there is something to be said about that momentum, and there's something to be said about starting that momentum. I can't tell you the number of times when, going out to do a social function where whenever I'm in the mood or not, like telling myself, hey, this is something that will be good for me. This is something that when I am on my way home, when we were coming back home, I can easily identify that, man, I'm glad I did this, right? And it's the
Yeah.
same thing with the gym. It's like, do I want to go to the gym? Oh no, I almost never want to go to the gym. When I'm already there, I have like the mindset, just to be honest, look, dude, I'm already here. Let's not waste our time. Let's actually put this, let's do everything to its fullest. You know what I mean? Like what you
Yep.
said, like I've spent money on this. What what's kind of funny, a little small tangent here is I'll be the first to admit when I first signed up with this guy, who, by the way, my personal trainer is awesome, just as a human being and as his expertise across the board. But when I first signed up for him, I had the option of, do I want to spend an hour with him or do I want to spend 30 minutes with him? And I was like, dude, if I spend 30 minutes and then I can split that into twice a week, that will get me into the gym. I need to get into the gym way more than I need
Yeah.
that extra 30 minutes with him at the gym. You know what I
Yeah, yeah.
mean? But yeah, and so it's all that to say, it's like that ball getting moving, starting it to move, and the
Mm.
importance of letting
Oh,
that
yeah, that's really good.
momentum continue and not throwing stuff in the way of it. Like I think that is a really smart way of thinking about it because it's so easy to want to do the easy thing. It's so easy not to get up. It's so easy to have a bad diet. And I mean that's a whole nother conversation. But
Yeah, yeah.
I completely agree with that. And I think that's a very good analogy.
Yeah, yeah, and even like for those people listening who are in the weightlifting world, the term is progressive overload.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't want to start by pushing your muscle to the absolute limit the first time you come into the gym, but with your 1 rep max or even like something in the 3 rep max range. You want to start with 1 or 2 sets below your capability, but you want to start at something you're definitely able to do and you're able to do consistently, and then stack your wins.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of, you and I were talking about, like, even just a little bit ago before we hit record, we were talking about why so many people with fitness related goals, like New Year's type
Yes.
jazz,
Yeah.
burn out within a month. And like, having worked with a gym, I'll tell you the amount of people who signed up with me on, the first week of January and who I never saw again by midway through February
Yeah.
was crazy. It was like your money making month was January because you're working with a ton of people and it's like, can you keep them?
Yeah.
But typically you can't, because people will start off with these crazy lofty goals. Like, I'm going to hit the gym 6 days a week. And I'm going to lift for an hour and a half a session, or whatever else. Or often for people, it's like, I'm going to wake up at 4:30 a.m. I'm going to do the stuff that The Rock says he does on his Instagram. And by the
Yeah.
way, Dwayne, I don't think you're up to what you say you're up to. I don't think you're getting 2.5 hours of sleep. I don't care.
Oh, I believe you.
What
I
you say.
believe you, Dwayne.
I'm on to you, The Rock. Yeah, but people who are like, I'm going to wake up at 4:30 every morning, I'm going to run for an hour, and then I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to do that 7 days a week.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I mean, if you really, really think you can do that, great. But it'd be much better, instead of burning out on that within 2 or 3 weeks, it's much better to say, what can I do every week forever? Like, what is something that's sustainable from now into eternity? Like, not a sprint. What's something I could do as a marathon pace?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
maybe that's 30 minutes once a week. And you're like, oh, I can do this. It's not that hard. Let me stack my win and make it 30 minutes twice a week. And then you make that 30 minutes 40 minutes. And you slowly progress as opposed to burning yourself out all
Yeah.
at once.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanna touch on that exact topic as well. Like I think that, oh man, it's the idea of burning out and preventing that is so critical for the gym. And so it makes me wonder, because we're having this conversation, how critical is it also in other disciplines in our life, right? And so that's why
Yeah.
we're bringing up the gym, everyone. We're not just saying, oh, if you're not in the gym, then you're a terrible person. But thinking about, for me, like if you don't mind, I want to share a little bit more detail about like how did I, from my own journey, prevent burnout that I normally would have experienced, right?
Sure.
And
Yep.
and I had this conversation with my loving wife, at the beginning of this journey, halfway through this journey, and even to this day. Like I wish I can raise my hand and say, yeah, I admit I'm getting older. Yeah, I admit that I want to have good health, 10, 20 years from now. And that health, the 20 years from now body starts today, right? And I want to do that for my family. I want to do that for my wife. I want to do that for my future. Yeah, that's not enough motivation for me. just, just to be, transparent and frank.
Yeah.
I wish
Yeah.
it was, and for a long time I kept telling myself there's something wrong with me. There's an expectation that I'm not meeting, even if it's my own expectation that I should be meeting, right? And so for me, it really, like, I touched base a little bit with having the physical trainer, but the trainer in and of itself is definitely was not my only motivation. A big thing for me that I identified early on with stacking your wins, right? You use that term, and I think that's so true. Something that I've found that I'm passionate about in the physical activity world. Trust me, there's plenty of dorky, nerdy things that I'm also very passionate about. But I like my football and I like sports. Yay, sports ball. But I'm really into volleyball, sand volleyball specifically. Ever since college, it's been something that I've had a high interest in. And I played volleyball in college for 4 or 5 years, but it was always recreational. It was always like everything I learned came from girls who played volleyball in high school. It wasn't anything strictly super competitive. But as I have really tried to rededicate my efforts in the last couple of years to this fitness journey, I got back into a level of competitive volleyball, at least competitive for my age and where I'm at skills wise, which is not the best in the world. But having something else in my life where it was outside of the things that I should be doing or I should be wanting, but instead identifying something that I already like, something that I already want to get better at, something that I can already stack my wins with. That was really a game changer for me in avoiding burnout. And it provided a level of convenience, right? Like it was like, man, when I'm playing, I'm so exhausted. My endurance is not where I want to be. Well, guess what, Tony? If you went and were in the gym, if you had a personal trainer and you were consistent with that, wouldn't that have an impact on your volleyball game? And here I am saying it absolutely has a huge impact, and that motivates the hell out of me. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. I have not been a cardio fan my whole life. And obviously there's all the benefits, and like on average you live like 7 years longer if you take at least 10,000 steps a day and all that sort of deal. But that isn't enough to get me there. But I tell you what will get me there is when I'm sparring with somebody in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Taekwondo and I'm gassed out of my mind, and they're not.
Yeah.
And they're beating up on me because I can't breathe anymore.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll get me there. So there is something to be said about finding something that motivates you, and maybe it isn't the most noble motivation. Maybe it isn't that thing that you feel like you should be motivated by. But you know what, man? If you can get yourself doing the thing that you need to be doing in the first place,
Yeah.
especially if you can build the habit, maybe it's okay if you don't have the perfect S-tier noble motivation to start with. Just get yourself in the dang door and then build the habit, and then you're going to reap the benefits one way or the other.
Yeah, and you were also talking about, these crazy workout hours or these crazy reps and everything else. Like something that I heard, and I had conversations with my own trainer not too long ago about, was like, stop trying to treat your fitness journey like it should be a crazy workout, like it should be this crazy intense CrossFit thing, which don't get me wrong, if you're into CrossFit and that works for you, then that's great. I don't want to hear about it, but it's still great for you. Uh, but what instead it was like, look at your schedule that you already have. Look at, oh, you get home from work at 4:30, or you get out of work at 4:30, and you might be able to squeeze in 30 minutes or an hour before you go to your family or X, Y, and Z. Find the hours that are convenient for you. Don't do the 6 o'clock in the morning stuff. I know for me that would never work. I am not an early bird. I'll do it if I have to, but I will never find success in building a discipline at 6 in the morning. You know what I mean? That just won't work for me personally.
Yeah, I wish I was, but
Yeah, I wish I was too.
don't-
That's
I
the
don't-
thing. I wish
have
I
it.
was too.
and you know what? Maybe I could become that, but I choose not to, okay? I choose to be the way I am in that regard. I'll change in some other ways.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, okay, so this is interesting. Have you ever heard of Charles Duhigg?
That one I have not.
He's an investigative journalist,
Okay.
and he wrote a book where he really got into the scientific literature on like the neuroscience of habit.
Mm.
Super fascinating book. And that has really instructed me a lot in terms of the way I view how the brain crunches and processes and develops habit and even willpower. But this is really, really interesting. He had a whole chapter on the Starbucks training process for new employees.
By the way, I worked at Starbucks for a hot minute. I remember their training process. It was really cool, but go on.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So, well, I was just going to say how terrible it is, but you've just ruined it. No, I'm just kidding. That's totally a joke. People have varying opinions of Starbucks, but you can't argue with how successful they've been. And he wrote about how in developing their training program, they knew they had to create an environment in which people, first of all, the environment is good enough that people are willing to pay $4, $5, $6, $7 for a cup of coffee. Yeah. And in order to do that, they had to have employees who were very disciplined and had very high willpower to be extremely positive and customer oriented in the middle of what's like one of the most grueling, like mentally grueling jobs you can work in, which is in fast food service. Yeah. So they built their training program to be focused around the building of one specific habit, which they viewed it as a habit, but they said the program has to be designed around building the habit of willpower. And so Duhigg quoted quite a few studies, and his book, The Power of Habit, I can't recommend it enough. It's less of like a hoorah, build habit, you should do this, and more of getting into all these different case studies and scientific literature about
the fundamentals,
the neuroscience of habit.
Yeah.
But he quoted quite a handful of studies that showed that willpower is it's arguably the single most important indicator for individual success. And obviously the markers for success really depend on like your view of life. But success in job, success in family, there's some relatively common markers for success that willpower is the single most important indicator of. And that self-discipline and willpower is actually a much better predictor of performance in life and in school than IQ is. So people with high IQ versus people who have a developed habit of willpower and self-discipline, those that have higher willpower and self-discipline that can be developed in the brain, on average, have much higher performance in school than those who have high IQ.
Yeah.
So all that to say, I thought that willpower was just like a do it or don't thing. But what they found is that it's very much like a muscle. And it's something where you can just gas the heck out, and like your willpower is cooked for that period of time. Like your ability to do something that you don't want to do anymore can just be gone. Yeah. But that said, like in terms of extending the analogy to willpower and a muscle, can exercising your willpower make it stronger the same way that lifting weights makes a muscle stronger? Yeah. And so there was a study done by 2 Australian researchers where they experimented both with increasing people's willpower in a workout setting and then increasing their willpower in a personal finance setting.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And this is crazy. What they found is that increasing the willpower muscle, in quotation marks, in one area resulted in increased willpower in the other area as well.
Wow. Huh.
So that is where that all or nothing thing starts to make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because evidently there's hard scientific, or there's hard study evidence to point to when you learn to force yourself to literally go to the gym when you don't want to, you're learning self-regulatory skills that spill over into other places in your life, which is why, and this is the reason why both my kids are in competitive and non-competitive sports. Both of them are learning music. Both of them, we push them in the areas of self-discipline, because when you're a child, that's the single easiest time it is to form those sort of habits that will last into an entire life. Yeah. So one of the reasons Starbucks is so successful, and maybe the reason they're so successful, is kind of intentionally or accidentally stumbling into that secret of turning self-discipline into an organizational habit through training.
Yeah.
So this whole discussion of like why it's so hard to change, I mean, probably you're not doing enough hard things. and it's like hard things are hard things.
Yes.
But they should stay hard, right? It's like hard things are never going to stop being hard. But in doing that hard thing, you're setting yourself up for more success the next time you have to do a hard thing.
Yes.
So when my son is sparring in Taekwondo or Jiu-Jitsu, and it is hard, and he is losing, and he is defeated, and he has to go back and try again later, he's developing a resilience. He's working that willpower muscle out in a very safe environment, because like the gym or Taekwondo or whatever arena like that, whether for an adult or for a child, that's a low stakes environment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Very true.
Like it's not live or die, probably. It's not like make it or break it. It's not your family's like financial future or whatever else. It's this one area. But I think one of the reasons why these physical disciplines are so incredibly important is because it is a relatively safe, low stakes area that you can develop some of the most important skills and application in the high stakes areas of life. It's like, are you going to show up as a husband or as a wife? Are you going to show up as a father or as a mother? Are you going to show up when the job gets really, really, really difficult and life gets super hard?
Yeah.
If you haven't developed that ability to persevere through the I don't want to do this anymore, to persevere through that, like, or I guess in other words, building the willpower muscle up to a certain point when the stakes are super high, well, how have you set yourself up to succeed or fail?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just across the board with relationships, whenever it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, what you just described is just, I think it's undervalued and under thought about. Like, I think that this is one of the exact reasons why we wanted to start a podcast like this, so that we can have these conversations and we can really dig in deep. And yeah, we're going to talk about the gym. Yeah, we're going to talk about some of our personal things that work for us. But why does it really matter at the end of the day? Not just being bigger and stronger and healthier, but how it really can make us have a more fulfilling life by having this willpower muscle being built up, being grown, and understanding that the first time you lift is always going to be some of the hardest times to set that discipline. I think that's so crucial, so critical. The one other thing I want to ask you, Nate, when you're talking about your kids, for example, and I hear exactly what you're saying about focusing on intentional activities for the younger mind in that safe environment. My question to you on that caveat kind of ties back to the previous thing that we were talking about, but in the context of the younger mind, how worried are you, or how preventative are you when it comes to the potential of burnout in your kids? In other words, when I was younger, right, I did every sport that you can imagine, right? I did basketball, baseball, football, golf, all kinds of stuff. And I was very active like that into high school as well. And I can
Yeah.
tell you that for me personally, and I can identify some more relational issues, but for me personally, I do have very strong memories of experiencing burnout at a young age. And so that's what my question to you goes is, in the context of what we've been talking about, how can we plug in burnout prevention as well?
With kids specifically, or with kids
Yeah.
and ourselves as human beings?
I think those are both great facets on either side of the coin. So however way you want to approach that first.
Sure. Yeah, with my kids, I think, I'm very close to my kids. I work from home. I help homeschool them. When I travel, I take my whole family with me as often as possible. So I'm very close with them. And because of that, maybe I've learned to recognize the difference between them being exhausted and lazy.
Yeah. And
And
there's
there's
a
a
line.
difference.
Yeah, there is a line between, and that being lazy is a thing. It's a thing for kids. It's a thing for adults as well. So I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last thing I want to do is is work them down to the bone or whatever else. But right now we were doing both. For both kids, we were doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Taekwondo.
Yeah.
And we paused on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because we've been traveling so constantly that the kids are just starting to get a little worn out. So we've been doing Taekwondo, and then my daughter just started ballet as well.
Yeah.
So we just, we're just close enough to them to know what's going on. And we just kind of keep our fingers on the metaphorical pulse of their like mental well-being. And I guess that's kind of how you'd have to look at it for yourself. It's very possible to lie to yourself, but it's also very difficult to lie to yourself and really know that, and really not know what's actually going on inside of you. So you know if you're just being lazy, and you also know if you're exhausted or hurt or sick.
Yeah.
So, give yourself time, give yourself rest, make sure you're eating well, make sure you're sleeping well, make sure you're doing all the other things that are actually important. And then if you're finding that you're skipping like the third session in a row because you just don't want to, that is probably your warning sign.
Yeah. That's so strong. Go ahead.
Yeah. Which is, I don't think there ever comes a point where you're immune to not wanting to do hard things, like I was saying earlier, because it wouldn't be a hard thing anymore. But you just gotta be real. I guess in the big picture, a little self-reflection goes a long way.
Yes.
The unexamined life is a life that's not worth living, I've heard it said. So taking the time to take mental stock of where you're at physically, where you're at mentally, where you're at spiritually, where you're at in your relationships, and then just being real with yourself, that can go a really, really long way. I think it's easy to cruise control and kind of trick ourselves into being justified in a lot of the things we're doing or not doing.
Very true.
It's a lot harder when we're sitting and examining our lives, journaling or processing or praying or whatever else. It's a lot harder to hide from yourself in those cases.
Yeah, and once more, this goes back to the beginning of our conversation as well, like the need for the community as well, like being open to, trusted advisors' insight, right? Whenever it's an intentional, explicit advice, or it's just talking to someone and just having that interaction can sometimes make you realize, oh, well, maybe I'm not okay in this area, or maybe I am stretching myself too thin, or maybe I'm not being accountable enough, and I know that I can do more. So I think that, a lot of what we've talked about today fits those categories very well.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, one thing that I've started doing, and I started this for the first time in my life, probably, I guess right at about a year ago. I started getting really, really consistent with this, and that's just the way I start my days. I haven't been really intentional with the beginnings of my days, but I had noticed that when I kind of stumble out of bed after staring at my phone for 10 minutes and then like wander into the rest of my day and then start to get into tasks, I'm just a lot slower to be willing to get to the things that I don't want to be doing, which is usually the stuff that's the most important to do.
Yeah.
So at this point, I've started banning myself from staying in bed after the alarm goes off. I've banned myself from looking at my phone until like an hour after I wake up. I get dressed, I get out into the sunlight, I get sun on my head, I spend time with God. I have a stretch routine, I have an assistant stretch routine. I drink a ton of water, and then I take a cold shower in the morning, which is miserable and has a lot of there's debatable health effects. But the one thing that it definitely has an effect on is my willingness to do something I don't want to do.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
I never want to do it. And this morning I didn't want to do it. The weather's finally starting to become a little bit less hot.
Yeah.
So that cold water in the morning is that much colder. And it's always miserable, but it's kind of like starting the day off with a small win, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And it's like teaching my brain, like, okay, brain, you're about to do a whole lot of things you don't want to do. So like, like get yourself in order because we're going to start off this way. But that really has helped me. It feels like I'm starting the day off with a win, being that intentional and tackling that many things that I don't want to do first thing in the morning.
It gets that momentum going.
It does feel like momentum, and it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But I do think we referred to it earlier. It's the stacking wins.
Yes.
You don't have to solve all the problems in your life all at once, but you should start taking steps one at a time to head towards the person that you want to become. For me, it's Jesus. I want to become more like Jesus in every area of my life. It's like, what does working out have to do with that? Well, we just spent an hour or so talking about exactly why that actually matters.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, there's no such thing as a static position in terms of your development as a human. You're becoming something constantly. You're going in a direction, whether you think you are or not. So, okay, like I'm going to take the small step today, and then maybe I can take 2 steps a week from now. But for now, 1 step is infinitely better than no steps. And that all or nothing effect, that neuroscience of willpower starts to kick in over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a couple of cliches, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. So for anyone who's listening to this, like whenever it's a challenge to actually go to the gym on a consistent basis that works for you, whatever that motivation looks like for you, whatever that consistency looks like for you. And it doesn't have to be the gym, and it doesn't have to be your fitness journey, right? Whatever that thing is, like what Nate was just talking about, his day looks this particular way because he is trying to challenge himself. He is trying to build those emotional muscles, right? That willpower muscle that we all have. So don't be afraid of breaking down that plan and really identifying what that next step is for you, because 1 step at a time, 1 bite at a time, it's the only way that we're going to make this happen. I know, Nate, for me, like I have a couple of things that I actually listed down here that, well, what if the next step is the most important step? A lot of people say it's the first step, but I think we both agree it's always that next step. For me, what are my own personal next steps? Well, I know that I could get better in the area of nutrition specifically, if we're talking about physical still. Like my wife and I, we do a pretty good job with the foods that we eat. And I would say as far as, tracking our food, which is something that we want to do, that's a goal that we have for ourselves. We're probably successful for a couple of weeks, once a quarter. You know what I mean? And so, I do want to challenge myself to do that harder thing because I know the results are something that I want in my life. And that's exactly what we're talking about, building the discipline of the hard thing. Another hard thing that, I wish I had the discipline for. I wish I could have the discipline on a daily basis to actually sit down and work on some of my personal side writings that I like to do and actually get to the point where I not only make very good progress through an actual novel, but finish a novel. Holy crap. Like actually being able to finish something, stacking that win, building that momentum. Those are things that, that's what it looks like for me, the next step. But, I would encourage anyone who's listening to this, identify what that win would be, that it can be an easy thing to get that ball rolling. And just like what Nate's been saying with his day, like that's something that we all can do in different spheres in the gym or not.
Yeah. Awesome. I echo that advice. It's very good advice. The worst thing to do is to take no steps.
That's right.
To do nothing and to sit paralyzed,
Don't be
not
afraid of
sure
change.
how to figure out all of your problems all at once.
Yep.
You don't have to figure it out all at once. Just take the step. Take the next one, right?
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been fun, Tony. Thanks for
We'll
thanks
figure
for,
out a good
biting this
sign
topic
off one
down with
day.
me. Yep. We're right at the beginning of this whole thing. But for anyone listening, thanks for hanging out with us.
Oh yeah, you're the real trooper.
Thanks for tackling the question of why change is so hard with us and the discipline of hard things. We'll be back the next episode with a topic or a question or maybe it'll be both.
Probably both.
Just stick around and you'll find out. There's the cliffhanger.
There you go.
But Tony, have a good one, buddy. And everyone out there, y'all as well.